Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the quiet, shadowy world of Victorian England, where bedtime wasn't always the gentle slide into sleep you might hope for. Imagine yourself lying in a heavy feather mattress, the room dimly lit by flickering candlelight, but your mind won't stop racing. The clock ticks past midnight and you feel wide awake again. You probably won't survive this sleepless ordeal without a few quirky tricks from the past. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world folks are joining from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a Victorian bedroom, heavy curtains drawn tight against the city's coal smoke and clatter. The air feels thick, not just from soot, but from the silent tension of sleepless souls all across England. Insomnia was a very real plague then, afflicting rich and poor alike. If you think modern stress is tough, imagine living without the help of today's meds, with doctors only beginning to understand the mind-body connection. For many Victorians, nighttime was not a refuge, but a battleground where their brains refused to shut down despite the darkness around them. The Industrial Revolution had its perks: more jobs, bustling cities, and new technologies. But it also meant long working hours, poor air quality, and a constant hum of urban noise that seeped into the night. Factory workers trudged home exhausted, yet sleep was often elusive. The middle and upper classes had their own worries. The pressure of social appearances, endless mental stimulation from books and newspapers, and a culture increasingly obsessed with productivity. You can almost hear the ticking of the mantel clock and the quiet rustle of a silk nightgown as sleepless Victorians turned and tossed, hoping for relief. Historians still argue whether Victorian insomnia was primarily caused by physical conditions, mental stress, or the shifting social environment of the era. Some suggest it was the anxiety of rapid change itself, a world hurtling forward yet haunted by old superstitions and fragile health. Others point to new scientific curiosities: the brain as a mysterious organ, the rise of psychology, and debates over whether too much artificial light was to blame. The word insomnia wasn't just a clinical term. It was woven into daily conversation. Newspaper advice columns frequently counseled readers on how to quiet their minds, often urging them to avoid stimulating activities before bed. A warning easier said than done when gas lamps flickered late into the evening and novels begged to be read. Sleep was understood as vital to health, but the exact recipe for a good night was elusive. The fact that you're still awake means the Victorians had a lot to figure out. Oddly enough, some people believed that simply worrying about sleep would make it vanish faster. It's a problem we still wrestle with today. The more you want to sleep, the more it slips through your fingers. Victorian doctors recommended various mental techniques to distract restless minds, but there was no one-size-fits-all cure. You might try counting sheep, as some advised, though imagine doing that in a drafty London attic. And then there was the creeping sense that if you failed to sleep, you might be courting serious illness. Melancholia, then, a broad term encompassing what we'd call depression and anxiety, was often linked to sleeplessness. Without restful nights, the body's defenses weakened, leaving you vulnerable to a host of ailments from headaches to digestive troubles. The Victorian mind was caught in a circle. Stress caused sleeplessness. Sleeplessness worsened stress, and so on. So, here you are wrapped in a thick wool blanket, hearing the occasional distant clip-clop of horse hooves on cobblestones, your eyelids stubbornly refusing to close. You wonder, how did the Victorians cope? What curious habits did they develop in their quest to finally drift off? The journey ahead will show you that even in a time obsessed with order and propriety, sleep was something surprisingly wild and strange. Remember this restless feeling. It'll return in different forms as we explore how the Victorians tried to tame the night. You're still lying there, restless, as the Victorian mind turns to the mysterious science of sleep, a subject only beginning to emerge from the fog of superstition. Sleep wasn't just a nightly pause. It was considered essential for health, vitality, and even moral character. Doctors of the day viewed poor sleep as a serious threat, warning that it could lead to nervous disorders or the dreaded melancholy. You might picture a Victorian physician in a high-collared coat, pondering the secrets of the brain while scribbling notes in candlelight, convinced that sleep held the key to curing many of society's ailments. Victorian medical thought leaned heavily on the humoral theory, a holdover from ancient times, which suggested that the balance of bodily fluids affected everything from temperament to health. Though outdated by the late 19th century, many still believed that an excess of black bile or phlegm could cause sleeplessness. The idea was that a disturbed body needed rest to rebalance itself, but figuring out how to induce that rest was another matter entirely. At the same time, burgeoning scientific fields like physiology and psychology were beginning to probe the mechanics of sleep. Researchers noted that sleep involved stages and cycles, though they lacked the tools to measure brain waves or REM sleep. Victorian doctors experimented with everything from nerve tonics to cold water treatments, hoping to lull patients into healthy slumber. You can almost imagine the squeak of leeches or the splash of a cold compress strange rituals meant to reset the nervous system. One mainstream medical fact you'll find fascinating is that Victorian doctors often recommended a strict schedule: go to bed early, avoid stimulating activities, and get up at the same time every day. The idea was that sleep was a natural process that could be disciplined like any other habit. Sound familiar? It's advice that echoes into our modern sleep hygiene tips, showing just how forward-thinking some Victorian ideas were. On the quirkier side, some physicians prescribed bizarre concoctions, think valerian root or opium-infused tonics, promising to ease the mind and body. While today's science might cringe at the risks, Victorians were desperate for relief, often willing to try anything. You might find it comforting or alarming that some of these potions doubled as both medicine and recreational drug, blurring the lines between treatment and escape. Historians still argue whether Victorian sleep troubles were mainly physical or psychological. Were sleepless nights caused by genuine nerve disorders, or were they a symptom of cultural anxieties fueled by rapid industrialization and changing social norms? Some scholars suggest that the era's obsession with productivity and self-control actually worsened insomnia as people felt pressure to be constantly on, even in their dreams. You sense the Victorian struggle wasn't just about bodies failing to rest, but minds refusing to quiet. The constant swirl of letters to friends, political debates, and a burgeoning print culture kept thoughts buzzing long after the candle was snuffed. The age was both fascinated and terrified by the power of the unconscious mind. Yet, it remained largely a mystery. Picture yourself now with a warm cup of chamomile tea in hand, the subtle scent wrapping around you as a reminder that some remedies were gentler and rooted in nature. Chamomile was a staple for calming nerves and easing the transition to sleep, though its effectiveness was more anecdotal than scientifically proven. The Victorians believed in the power of ritual. The slow preparation and quiet sipping could be as important as the herb itself. So, while science edged forward, many Victorians balanced between the rational and the mystical. Sleep was medicine, yes, but also a mystery wrapped in candle smoke and whispered advice. Your restless mind might still be buzzing, but soon will wander deeper into the odd remedies and nightly routines they embraced in hopes of finding that elusive rest. Keep that teacup close. You're going to need it. You cradle your warm cup, feeling the gentle weight as you prepare for the rituals Victorians swore by to beckon sleep's arrival. Odd remedies abound in this era, mixing the sensible with the downright peculiar, as if the night itself demanded a delicate negotiation between science and superstition. You might imagine a Victorian woman steeping chamomile or lavender, the kitchen filled with the faint aroma of dried herbs as she whispers a goodnight blessing. These baths, teas, and tinctures were more than habit. They were carefully crafted attempts to lull the mind and body into a sleepy surrender. The most mainstream remedy you'd recognize is the warm bath. Not just any bath, but an elaborate, slow soak in a copper tub heated just right. Doctors believed warm water relaxed muscles and soothed nerves, coaxing the body toward rest. The ritual often included a precise sequence warm bath, followed by drying off with heavy flannel towels, then slipping into soft night clothes, sometimes perfumed with rosewater or lavender oil. This ritual of transition from waking to sleeping self was sacred. It's fascinating that warm baths remain a popular sleep aid even today. Proof that some Victorian wisdom still floats on the water's surface. Yet not all remedies were so comforting. Some involved drinking bitters or cordials spiked with opium or laudanum sedatives that eased pain and quieted anxiety, but could also invite dependency. You're probably relieved that modern sleep aids have stricter regulations. The idea of falling asleep to the gentle haze of a narcotic might sound tempting on a rough night, but Victorians often paid a high price for these cures. Historians still argue whether such opiate use was a compassionate medical practice or a slippery slope into addiction that Victorian society quietly tolerated. Other odd remedies included putting crushed camphor in pillowcases to refresh the air and stimulate sleep, or using valerian root as a tincture to calm jittery nerves. Valerian had a distinctive earthy aroma that some found soothing, others just smelled something like old socks. Folk wisdom and medical advice mingled freely, blurring lines. You might chuckle imagining someone nodding off after burying their nose in a smelly pillow. A particularly quirky Victorian trick involved dream pillows, small sachets filled with herbs like lavender hops and mugwort. These were tucked under the head or mattress to induce pleasant dreams and prevent nightmares. While today's dream pillows are mostly novelty items, Victorians took the practice seriously, believing certain plants could influence the content and quality of sleep. You could almost imagine yourself drifting off to the scent of lavender fields, far from the soot-choked city. Historians still debate how effective these herbal remedies really were. Did the scents and rituals calm the mind, or were these simply placebo comforts in a time before modern sleep science? Either way, the slow pacing of these bedtime customs created a gentle rhythm, signaling to the body that it was time to rest. Another curious approach was the consumption of milk, often warmed with honey believed to be nourishing and soporific. The image of a Victorian mother handing her child a warm cup before bed fits neatly into the broader theme of comfort and routine. Interestingly, while milk's sleep-promoting effects are often debated today, the calming effect of ritualized warmth remains clear. You might begin to notice a pattern the more elaborate or sensory the ritual, the more it helped to prepare the mind for rest. The evening was transformed into a sacred ceremony, each step a soft invitation to the quiet world of sleep. Next up, we'll meet the peculiar specialists who tried to systematize these practices and invented strange treatments of their own, some of which would make you wonder if they'd been taking their own medicines a little too liberally. You are settling deeper now, the scent of lavender still lingering as we meet the rising figures of Victorian sleep specialists, those doctors and therapists who claimed to hold the keys to the elusive kingdom of rest. Unlike the more general physicians, these sleep-focused experts were beginning to view insomnia as a unique ailment worthy of dedicated attention. Imagine a small, dimly lit consulting room, lined with leather-bound medical texts and curious devices meant to soothe nerves and coax the body into slumber. One mainstream fact is that the late 19th century saw the birth of what we might call proto-sleep medicine. Doctors began developing treatments that targeted nervous system disorders, often recommending strict sleep regimens that included precise bedtimes, limited caffeine, and abstention from stimulating social activities after dusk. You can almost hear the ticking of a brass clock as a physician insists that sleep is as crucial as food and air for mental health. This marked a significant shift. Sleep was no longer just a passive state, but a vital component of overall wellness. Yet the prescriptions were sometimes stranger than you might expect. Some specialists advocated for white noise therapies long before white noise machines existed. One Victorian physician recommended the gentle sound of a spinning wheel, or even the ticking of a clock to lull patients. Others prescribed faint music, or the rhythmic tap-tap of a metronome to steady racing thoughts. Historians still argue whether these methods genuinely helped or simply distracted the mind, though the soothing repetition certainly shares qualities with modern sleep aids. Light therapy, too, was a curiosity. The Victorian obsession with gas lamps and candles extended to concerns about their impact on circadian rhythms, though no one used that term yet. Some specialists advised dimming or shading lights to mimic natural dusk, believing that exposure to bright light late at night could prevent the onset of sleepiness. The discovery of electricity in the latter part of the century only added to the confusion, with many worried that the new electric bulbs might be ruining their precious rest. In a more unconventional vein, some doctors explored the use of massage beds or reclining chairs designed to relax muscles and reduce tension before bedtime. These contraptions looked like a cross between a dentist's chair and a fainting couch, often involving gentle rocking motions. You might picture yourself slipping into one and feeling as if you're being rocked by a very slow, very polite river. Sleep specialists also often recommended dietary adjustments, suggesting that patients avoid heavy evening meals or stimulating substances like tea, coffee, and alcohol. Instead, they encouraged light broths, warm milk, and calming herbal infusions. The underlying principle was simple. The body, if not taxed by digestion or excitement, could surrender more easily to sleep. One particularly curious treatment involved sleep collars, stiff neck bands, designed to restrict head movement and encourage stillness. While today this might sound uncomfortable or even bizarre, Victorians believed that keeping the body still was crucial for the brain to enter rest. You might smirk, imagining a whole generation of people sporting these uncomfortable accessories in bed. Historians continue to debate the efficacy and ethics of many Victorian sleep treatments, especially given the widespread use of opiates and other sedatives. Were these specialists truly advancing sleep science, or were they capitalizing on anxieties with sometimes dubious remedies? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. You might also find it reassuring that despite their quirks, these doctors recognized the importance of routine calm and environment for sleep ideas that remain central today. Their work laid the foundation for modern sleep medicine, even if some of their tools seem like relics from a mad inventor's workshop. As you imagine yourself sinking into a softly rocking massage bed, or hearing the rhythmic ticking of a clock, you begin to feel the first tendrils of calm creeping in. But the night is far from over next. We'll peek behind the curtains into the privileged bedtime rituals of the Victorian elite, where luxury met insomnia in curious ways. You're now quietly slipping through the ornate, velvet-draped bedrooms of Victorian high society, where bedtime was an art form and insomnia a whispered frustration behind heavy silks. The upper classes took their evening rituals seriously, often as seriously as a royal coronation, but infinitely more private and slower paced. Imagine sitting in a plush armchair, the scent of sandalwood drifting softly as a lady or gentleman prepares for bed with a sequence of delicate actions designed to soothe the mind and signal the end of a long day. One solid fact here is that Victorian elites often engaged in prolonged pre-bedtime activities like reading by gaslight or playing soft music on a pianoforte. Books ranged from sentimental novels to philosophical treatises chosen carefully to avoid excitement or distress. You can almost hear the gentle page turns and the distant murmur of a string quartet playing something slow and melancholic. These rituals, slow and deliberate, were meant to transition the restless mind toward calm. The elite were also quite fond of elaborate wind-down routines, including aromatic baths infused with rose petals, lavender, and other calming botanicals. The bath wasn't just about cleanliness. It was a form of self-care and meditation, a moment to step away from social pressures and daily anxieties. You might picture a softly lit bathroom, steam curling like ghostly fingers in the air, the warmth enveloping tired muscles and tense nerves. Quirky, yet true, some Victorian aristocrats believed in the power of dream catches of sorts. Delicate embroidered cloths hung near the bed to trap bad dreams, a practice borrowed from folk traditions but given an elegant twist. You can smile at the thought of silk tassels swaying gently a silent guardian against the night's unrest. Historians still argue whether these customs had any real calming effect or simply served as comforting placebo rituals. A slightly amusing but telling tidbit is that some well-to-do Victorians used nightcaps not as drinks, but as soft fabric coverings for their heads believed to preserve body heat and aid sleep. The idea of a gentle fabric cocoon wrapping your head might feel oddly cozy, or just a little strange, depending on your tolerance for nighttime accessories. Another common element was the regulation of temperature. Bedrooms were carefully managed with thick curtains, heavy quilts, and sometimes even small charcoal braziers to maintain a steady warmth. Too cold or too hot was thought to disrupt sleep, so climate control was an essential, if imperfect, art. You might imagine fluffing up feather pillows and pulling heavy velvet curtains tight against the chilly night. Music played a subtle but important role. Soft lullabies or slow classical pieces were often played or sung believed to soothe nerves and create a calming atmosphere. This use of sound as a sleep aid resonates even today, showing how deeply ingrained these practices were. Victorian elites also placed great importance on lighting. They preferred dim, warm gas lamps or candles with low flames, avoiding harsh illumination that might stimulate the mind. Some even believed that the flickering of candlelight had a hypnotic, calming effect, almost like a natural sleep inducer. You can almost feel the soft glow painting gentle shadows on the wallpaper. Remember, though, that despite these indulgences, insomnia spared no one. Some aristocrats spent long nights staring at the ceiling, trapped in restless thoughts, their bedtime rituals no match for the anxieties of the day. The pressure to appear composed and serene in public made private sleeplessness all the more isolating. So, as you imagine yourself wrapped in silk and candlelight, the quiet music soothing your nerves, know that the Victorian elite were no strangers to the nightly battle against wakefulness. Their rituals were often lavish, but rooted in the same human need to find peace in the dark. Next, we'll shift scenes entirely, stepping into the noisy, cramped quarters of working-class Victorians, where sleep was a different kind of struggle altogether. You now find yourself transported from the velvet curtains of the Victorian elite to the cramped, dimly lit rooms of working-class families, where the struggle for sleep was far more gritty and complicated. Imagine the creak of narrow floorboards, the faint smell of coal smoke lingering in the air, and the faint chorus of coughing and murmurs from neighbors packed close together in terraced houses. Here, bedtime was less a serene ritual and more a necessity squeezed between long days of exhausting labor and constant noise. One straightforward fact is that many working-class Victorians faced relentless disruptions to sleep. Factory whistles, crowded living conditions, and poor ventilation all contributed to an environment hostile to rest. Unlike their wealthier counterparts, they lacked the luxury of quiet bedrooms or controlled temperatures. You can almost hear the clatter of carts in the street and the crackle of fires struggling to warm drafty rooms, making it difficult to settle into restful slumber. The quirky side of working-class sleep troubles often involved inventive, if improvised, solutions. For example, some families used makeshift sound barriers, piles of old blankets or thick curtains hung over windows and doors to muffle street noise. Others hung herbs like lavender or rosemary near beds, not only for their scent, but to ward off bad air, which was believed to cause illness and restless nights. The line between medical advice and folk belief blurred here in fascinating ways. Historians still debate how much control working-class Victorians truly had over their sleep environments. While some argue that cultural habits and attitudes towards rest played a role, others emphasize the brutal physical and economic realities that limited options for a good night's sleep. It's clear, however, that the daily grind took a serious toll on nighttime rest. Unlike the slow-paced evenings of the gentry working class, Victorians often had to sleep in shifts or adapt their schedules around factory hours. Night shifts and early mornings meant irregular sleep patterns were common. Imagine sharing a small bed with siblings or parents, the weight of exhaustion, heavy but sleep still elusive. The social expectation to endure hardship quietly added another layer of mental stress. Some workers turned to small comforts like a quick sip of warm milk or a few bites of simple porridge to calm their bodies before bed. But heavy or greasy foods, common due to cheap availability, could disrupt digestion and worsen insomnia. This nutritional angle is one aspect often overlooked but deeply tied to sleep quality. Interestingly, despite the harsh conditions, communal bonds sometimes eased the burden. Neighbors might share bedtime stories or sing lullabies, creating pockets of calm in otherwise restless homes. These moments of shared humanity remind us that sleep is not just a physical necessity, but also an emotional refuge. Noise remained a constant adversary, though. The clanging of factory machinery, the shouting of street vendors, and even the occasional drunken brawl spilled into the night. You can imagine trying to find silence amid such chaos. No wonder many working-class Victorians counted sheep, or rather, counted the minutes until dawn. The contrast between these realities and the quiet luxury of elite rituals couldn't be starker yet. Both classes wrestled with the same elusive goal, a peaceful night's sleep. Your restless mind may find some comfort in knowing you're not alone in this struggle across time and social boundaries. Next, we'll explore the Victorian obsession with light and darkness. The flickering candles, gas lamps, and the very first electric bulbs, and how these sources shaped the quest for sleep. You're now surrounded by a warm, flickering glow. The soft, uneven light of candles and gas lamps casting gentle shadows on floral wallpaper and polished wood. Light in Victorian England wasn't just practical. It was a central player in the nightly drama of sleep and wakefulness. Imagine the soothing dance of flame light, the occasional sputter of a gas jet, and the way shadows seemed to cradle the room in quiet comfort. But these lights were a double-edged sword in the Victorian sleep story. A well-known fact is that before widespread electricity, Victorians relied heavily on candles and gas lamps to illuminate their homes after dark. The quality and intensity of this light varied wildly depending on your social class and location. Some rooms were bathed in steady, warm glow, while others flickered precariously in drafty corners. You can almost hear the soft clink of a candle snuffer and the faint hiss of a gas flame being lit. The light was meant to help you wind down, but sometimes did the opposite. Bright, harsh lighting could stimulate the brain, making it harder to relax. Some Victorians believed that dim, flickering light was more natural, and thus more conducive to sleep. There's a quaint image of a family gathered around a low, shaded lamp, reading quietly, until eyelids grew heavy, a comforting scene that softens the harshness of industrial city life. Curiously, historians still debate the actual impact of gaslighting on Victorian sleep patterns. While it's clear that artificial light delayed bedtime and disrupted natural rhythms, some argue that the novelty and psychological comfort of light also helped ease anxieties during the dark hours. You can imagine the tension between fear of the night and the reassuring glow of lamps as a constant push and pull in Victorian households. Another intriguing Victorian belief was that candles and gas lamps emitted a kind of restful aura. This led to the use of special lampshades, tinted glass, or even perfumed candles to create an atmosphere more likely to promote sleep. Some even experimented with colored lighting, blue or green shades thought to calm the nerves, though such ideas were more art than science. Electric lighting, just emerging toward the century's end, added a new layer of complexity. While electric bulbs promised cleaner and safer light, many feared their harsh, constant glare would ruin sleep entirely. Imagine Victorian skeptics peering at these glowing orbs with suspicion, convinced they might fry the brain or disturb delicate nerves. The widespread adoption of electric light in bedrooms would only come much later, after decades of trial and debate. The ambiance created by these various light sources also had practical consequences. Rooms with heavy curtains and shutters were kept dark during the day to preserve warmth, making the arrival of evening light all the more dramatic. The ritual of lighting lamps became a marker of transition from day to night, a visual cue that the world was slowing down, ready for rest. Interestingly, light was also linked to moral ideas. Bright, harsh light was sometimes associated with overstimulation and moral decay, while soft, muted lighting was thought to encourage virtue and tranquility. You might smile at the Victorian tendency to assign such weighty meanings to something as simple as a lamp. As you imagine the flickering candle casting gentle shadows across a high-backed chair, or the soft glow of a gas lamp warming a bedside table, you feel the delicate tension between light and darkness that shaped the Victorian night. This battle between illumination and sleepiness was more than physical. It was a metaphor for the era's struggle to balance progress with peace. Next, we'll explore how Victorian gender roles influenced who got to sleep well and who fought longer, quieter battles with insomnia. You settle further into the quiet darkness as the story turns toward Victorian gender roles and their curious influence on sleep, especially insomnia. Picture a Victorian household after lights dim, where the men often retreated to their studies or smoking rooms, while women were left navigating the complex and often lonely terrain of nighttime wakefulness. You might imagine the gentle rustle of a corset loosening a faint sigh as the day's burdens shift into the night, and the quiet pacing of restless minds, especially among women. A widely acknowledged fact is that Victorian women reported insomnia at higher rates than men. Medical texts of the era frequently referred to female nerves or hysteria terms, now outdated, but reflecting a common belief that women's delicate constitutions made them more prone to sleeplessness. You can almost picture a physician in a somber room, gently prescribing rest cures or sedatives intended to calm these nervous symptoms, sometimes with little understanding of the underlying causes. What's less well known and a bit quirky is that some Victorian remedies for women's insomnia included tight wrapping or swaddling at night, designed to prevent movement and calm the nervous system. This practice, while rare, highlights the era's inclination toward physical restraint as a cure for mental unrest. Imagine trying to sleep comfortably while feeling lightly bound, a strange mix of comfort and confinement. Historians still argue whether these gendered sleep issues were biological or socially constructed. Was women's insomnia genuinely linked to physiology, or was it exacerbated by societal pressures, limited freedoms, and the mental strain of expected domestic perfection? Many scholars believe the latter, pointing out that Victorian women were often burdened with exhaustive household duties, childcare, and social expectations, all while coping with limited outlets for stress relief. Women's sleep struggles were compounded by the era's silence around mental health and emotional well-being. Discussing anxiety or depression openly was taboo, leaving many women to suffer in quiet isolation. The nighttime, when distractions faded, often amplified worries and exhaustion. You might imagine a woman sitting alone by a dim lamp, the house asleep around her, her thoughts too noisy to settle. Sleep remedies for women frequently included herbal teas, gentle massages, and baths infused with calming oils. You can almost smell the lavender and chamomile as they soaked in the water, a small sensory balm against the overwhelming mental chatter. Some women kept journals or wrote letters late into the night, using writing as a quiet companion and a way to tame restless thoughts. Interestingly, Victorian literature often portrayed sleepless women as both fragile and mysterious symbols of both virtue and vulnerability. The trope of the sleepless lady haunted by thoughts or dreams captured the imagination of readers, but also reinforced gender stereotypes about emotional sensitivity. You might find it reassuring to know these portrayals were as much cultural storytelling as medical reality. Men, on the other hand, were often expected to suppress complaints about sleep troubles, framing restlessness as weakness. This social dynamic meant that women's insomnia was more visible in medical and popular discourse, even if men suffered quietly. The gendered lens shaped not only treatment, but also how insomnia was experienced and understood. As you picture the quiet, candlelit bedrooms where these nighttime battles played out, you're reminded that sleep, like many other things, was deeply intertwined with identity and social roles. The Victorian night was a stage where gendered expectations played out as much as biology or medicine. Next, we'll turn to children's bedtime customs, where stories, songs, and a little discipline mixed in a different kind of sleepy dance. You now find yourself in a cozy Victorian nursery, dimly lit by a softly glowing oil lamp. The day's hustle has settled, replaced by the gentle murmur of a caregiver's voice weaving stories and lullabies. Bedtime for children in Victorian England was a blend of tenderness, routine, and sometimes a firm hand reflecting the era's complex mix of affection and discipline. Imagine the soft rustle of a child's nightgown, the creak of wooden floorboards, and the soothing cadence of a lullaby floating through the air as little ones prepare to surrender to sleep. A well-known fact is that Victorian families placed great importance on bedtime stories and songs, believing these narratives could calm children's minds and guide them gently into the realm of dreams. Classic tales often included moral lessons, reinforcing good behavior as part of the nightly ritual. You might picture a mother reading a fairy tale aloud, her voice steady and comforting, while the child's eyelids grow heavy. On the quirky side, some Victorian parents used bedwetting alarms, rudimentary devices, or even makeshift systems involving bells to train children away from nighttime accidents. While this seems more modern than expected, these early methods reflected a strict approach to childhood discipline even at bedtime. You could imagine a small bell clanging softly in the background, a gentle reminder of order and control. Historians still debate how much Victorian childhood was shaped by these strict routines versus more spontaneous family interactions. Some scholars argue that the era's emphasis on discipline extended into bedtime, with children expected to fall asleep promptly and without complaint. Others suggest that moments of storytelling and singing provided a crucial emotional bond, softening the rigid expectations. Bedtime often involved a series of prescribed steps: washing up, changing into night clothes, saying prayers, and then the story or lullaby. Prayer, particularly the Lord's Prayer, was a common closing ritual, reinforcing religious values alongside sleep habits. The sound of a child's quiet voice joining in was both soothing and a reminder of the era's intertwining of faith and daily life. Another interesting custom was the use of night lights, small oil lamps kept burning near the bed to keep away fears of the dark. Children were thought to be especially susceptible to nightmares and night terrors, so these soft lights provided comfort and a sense of security. You might imagine a flickering lamp casting gentle shadows, shaping a cocoon of safety in the nursery. Discipline could be firm. Stories warn of being put to bed without supper or left to think about their behavior, a reminder that Victorian parenting sometimes involved strict consequences even at night. Yet these measures were framed within a broader goal of nurturing proper habits and self-control. You might find it charming that some families had goodnight kisses as part of the ritual, a small gesture of love amidst the formality. These moments softened the edges of bedtime, offering warmth before the day's close. As you drift with the rhythm of lullabies and whispered prayers, you sense the careful balance Victorians struck between order and comfort in children's sleep. Bedtime was a quiet performance part, ritual part, love song part, preparation for the challenges of tomorrow. Next, we'll delve into the Victorian fascination with hypnosis and mesmerism, as curious attempts to cure sleeplessness and nervous tension. You're now drifting into a dimly lit Victorian parlor, where the flicker of candlelight dances across polished mahogany furniture and velvet drapes. Here, the mysterious arts of hypnotism and mesmerism take center stage as hopeful treatments for sleeplessness and nervous tension. Imagine a charismatic figure cloaked in a dark suit, slowly waving a pendulum, or gently touching a patient's forehead, promising to lull the restless mind into peaceful slumber through the power of suggestion alone. One well-documented fact is that mesmerism, named after Franz Mesmer, an 18th century physician, enjoyed a resurgence in Victorian England. It was seen as a cutting-edge therapy that could address a variety of ailments including insomnia by influencing the animal magnetism believed to flow through the body. While modern science dismisses mesmerism as pseudoscience, many Victorians swore by its calming effects and sought out mesmerists for relief from their sleepless nights. On the quirky side, some practitioners combined mesmerism with elaborate theatrical performances, complete with soft music, dimmed lights, and dramatic gestures designed to induce trance-like states. These sessions were part medical treatment, part entertainment, blurring the lines between healing and spectacle. You might chuckle, picturing patients swaying gently in overstuffed chairs as the mesmerist intones soothing words in a voice barely above a whisper. Historians still debate whether mesmerism's effects were psychological placebo or if the induction of trance genuinely helped reset nervous tension. Some argue that the power of suggestion alone was enough to ease anxiety and promote relaxation, much like today's hypnotherapy practices. Others believe the social context and patient expectations played a huge role in its success. Victorian hypnotism evolved from mesmerism and was increasingly used by medical professionals to address insomnia. Doctors experimented with guiding patients into hypnotic sleep, hoping to bypass the restless mind's chatter. You might imagine yourself in a Victorian clinic reclining on a chaise longue as a doctor's calm voice ushers you toward restful darkness. Interestingly, some patients reported vivid, sometimes unsettling dreams during hypnotic sleep, leading to debates about whether this was a beneficial deep rest or a sign of disturbed nerves. The science was murky, but the quest for new remedies was relentless. This period also saw the rise of suggestion therapy, where patients were encouraged to visualize peaceful scenes or imagine themselves falling asleep naturally. The technique anticipated modern cognitive behavioral therapies for insomnia, though it lacked today's clinical rigor. You may find it comforting that even over a century ago, people recognized the mind's role in sleep and sought gentle, non-invasive ways to quiet restless thoughts. The Victorian fascination with mesmerism and hypnosis shows a society eager to blend science mystery and a touch of showmanship in pursuit of rest. As you imagine the soft cadence of a hypnotist's voice and the gentle dimming of the room, you may feel the first real tug of sleep. But the night still holds more stories. Next, we'll wander into the realm of folk beliefs and animal remedies that seemed to bring comfort to many. You're now stepping softly into a dim, cozy Victorian cottage, where folk beliefs and animal remedies mingle with everyday life, offering comfort in the most unexpected ways. Imagine the flicker of a hearth fire, the soft clucking of a hen nearby, and the gentle rustle of herbs drying in bunches above the door. Here, the boundary between medicine and superstition blurs, as people turn to curious animal-related cures to chase away restless nights. A well-known historical fact is that many rural Victorians believed certain animal parts held protective or soothing powers. For example, the hare's foot was a popular charm often placed under pillows to invite sweet dreams and ward off nightmares. You might smirk at the thought of a soft, furry talisman nestled beneath your head. But for many, this was a deeply trusted remedy passed down through generations. On the quirkier side, some folk remedies involved placing live animals like small birds or even frogs in specific locations near the bedroom, believing their presence could influence sleep quality. While modern sensibilities cringe at the idea, these practices reflected a symbolic connection to nature's rhythms, a kind of primal comfort in the dark. Imagine the faint chirping of a canary nearby, a tiny lullaby from the natural world. Historians still debate whether these animal remedies were primarily psychological comforts, or if some had practical benefits like the calming effect of soothing sounds, or the placebo power of ritual. The line between folk medicine and early science was fuzzy, with both elements entwined in the search for rest. Other animal-related customs included the use of beeswax candles prized for their clean burn, and subtle honey scent believed to create a peaceful, sleeping environment. The connection between animals and light deepened the sensory experience of bedtime, intertwining natural elements with domestic rituals. Interestingly, some rural Victorians attributed sleep problems to evil spirits, or night hags, and animal charms were thought to offer protection against these supernatural threats. This belief gave rise to nighttime customs like hanging animal pelts or carvings in windows and over beds, creating an invisible shield against the unknown. You might find it charming or a bit eerie depending on your comfort with Victorian folklore. The presence of pets in Victorian homes also contributed to sleep experiences. Cats and dogs often shared bedrooms, their rhythmic breathing and warmth, providing companionship and comfort. Yet the occasional restless animal could also disturb sleep, reminding you that peace is sometimes a fragile balance. You can almost feel the soft weight of a favorite animal charm in your palm, a talisman bridging the gap between anxiety and tranquility. These remedies weren't just superstition, they were expressions of hope in a world where science and belief coexisted uneasily. As you settle into this cozy, animal-filled corner of Victorian life, you begin to sense the rich tapestry of nighttime practices woven from both tradition and necessity. The night holds many paths to rest, some strange, some soothing. Next, we'll explore the bedroom itself, the furniture fabrics and design choices that shaped Victorian sleep environments. You're now sinking into a heavy feather mattress surrounded by the thick drapes and rich fabrics of a Victorian bedroom designed with sleep in mind. The room feels like a cocoon, dark, warm, and carefully arranged to soothe both body and mind. Imagine running your hand over the velvet curtains, feeling the softness of cotton sheets and smelling the faint trace of lavender tucked between pillows. In this space, every detail was chosen to create an environment conducive to rest, even if the battle for sleep was far from guaranteed. One clear fact is that Victorian bedrooms often featured heavy furniture made of dark woods like mahogany or oak, creating a sense of solidity and permanence. Canopies and four-poster beds weren't just decorative. They served practical purposes like keeping drafts at bay and maintaining warmth. The idea was that physical comfort and a stable environment were key to calming nerves and promoting restful sleep. On the quirkier side, feather beds themselves were considered a luxury and believed to cradle the sleeper in softness. Yet they could also be sources of discomfort due to dust and mites, a kind of sneaky insomnia contributor. The very thing meant to lull you to sleep sometimes added to restlessness, though most Victorians accepted these inconveniences as the price of comfort. Historians still debate the extent to which these environmental factors truly improved sleep, or simply provided a placebo effect. Did the weight of heavy quilts and the scent of herbal sachets actually soothe the nervous system, or were they part of a comforting routine that helped focus the mind away from worries? The answer likely varies from person to person. Victorian bedrooms were also notable for their thick curtains and heavy drapes, which blocked out street noise and light, creating a dark, quiet sanctuary. Some bedrooms even had shutters or blinds to seal out the noisy, polluted air of city nights. You can almost imagine pulling closed a velvet curtain, shutting out the outside world as a first step toward peace. Textiles played a major role in the sensory experience of sleep. Cotton and linen sheets were common, but often layered with wool blankets and heavy quilts. These layers were both practical to combat chilly nights and symbolic of security, wrapping the sleeper in warmth. The textures themselves could be soothing to the touch, part of the ritual of preparing for bed. A charming Victorian detail was the inclusion of scented sachets tucked under pillows or between sheets. Lavender was the most popular choice, prized for its calming properties. You might catch a faint, lingering scent as you settle in a subtle nudge toward relaxation. Other herbs like rosemary and hops also made appearances, their fragrances part of the era's quiet nightly symphony. Some bedrooms had small night tables holding a glass of water, a small book, or a gentle candle. These items reflected the evolving understanding that sleep wasn't just about lying down, but involved a whole environment conducive to rest. The careful arrangement of these objects showed how much thought Victorians gave to creating a sanctuary from the day's anxieties. You might smile at the Victorian idea that a perfect sleep environment was a mix of sensory comfort and ritual textures, sense and darkness working in harmony. Even if you're not quite ready to tuck yourself under layers of wool tonight, it's a gentle reminder that rest often depends on more than just closing your eyes. Next, we'll explore how Victorian lullabies and poetry contributed to calming restless minds and ushering in sleep. You're now hearing the soft, rhythmic cadence of a Victorian lullaby, a gentle melody weaving its way through the quiet bedroom air like a tender whisper. Poetry and song played an essential role in Victorian bedtime rituals, soothing restless minds and inviting the drifting descent into sleep. Imagine a mother's gentle voice carrying verses about lambs, stars, or quiet dreams. The lilting tunes echoing softly in the stillness as little eyes grow heavy and breathing slows. A well-known fact is that lullabies and poetry were seen as more than mere entertainment. They were tools to calm the nerves and shape peaceful sleep. Collections of children's verses and nursery rhymes flourished in print, often paired with melodies designed to be simple and repetitive, easing both child and caregiver into a calm state. You might recall familiar lines like, "Hush, little baby, don't say a word crafted to soothe through gentle repetition." On the quirkier side, some Victorian lullabies included rather stern or cautionary verses, warning children against misbehavior, or warning of imaginary creatures lurking in the dark. These songs were meant to teach as well as comfort, combining affection with discipline. You can almost imagine a tiny child quietly trembling at a tale of the bogeyman balanced against the loving embrace of the singing parent. Historians still debate the psychological impact of such dual-purpose lullabies. Did they comfort children, or did the warnings and moral lessons create underlying anxiety? Some suggest that the steady rhythm and tone of the music outweighed the content, serving primarily to relax and signal bedtime. Poetry, too, was often read or recited aloud before sleep. Gentle poems about nature, nightfall, or dreams helped transition the mind from wakefulness to rest. The Victorian penchant for sentimental and reflective verse meant that these readings were imbued with calm introspection, inviting listeners to ponder peaceful imagery rather than daily worries. Interestingly, some Victorian poets wrote specifically for bedtime crafting verses that emphasized softness, quiet, and the natural cycle of day into night. These works were sometimes published in magazines or collections, aimed at families underscoring the cultural importance of a soothing end to the day. You might smile at the idea that in an age before screens and electronic distractions, words and music were the main tools for calming the mind. The careful selection of stories, poems, and songs reflected a deep understanding of the emotional landscape of sleep. Lullabies often incorporated tactile elements as well, rocking a child, gently stroking hair, or patting backs, physical actions synchronized with the rhythms of song. This multi-sensory approach to sleep preparation mirrors many modern practices, demonstrating the timelessness of soothing touch combined with sound. As you imagine these tender moments, the soft melodies and whispered poems fade gently into the night, helping your mind settle into a quieter place. The Victorian night, with all its rituals and stories, becomes a shared journey toward rest. Next, we'll uncover the curious world of commercial sleep aids and the fine line between genuine help and quackery in Victorian England. You're now stepping into a bustling Victorian apothecary, where shelves overflow with colorful bottles, powders, and mysterious elixirs, all promising a cure for sleeplessness. Commercial sleep aids had become a booming business, blurring the line between genuine medicine and quackery. Imagine the clink of glass vials, the scent of herbs and chemicals mixing in the air, and the eager voices of customers searching for that elusive potion to finally grant them a good night's rest. One solid fact is that patent medicines' over-the-counter remedies heavily advertised in newspapers and posters were incredibly popular in Victorian England. These concoctions often contained ingredients like opium alcohol or chloral hydrate, offering quick relief but with hidden risks. The allure of a magical sleep cure was powerful, especially for those suffering chronic insomnia with little medical support. On the quirkier side, some ads promise that simply applying sleep drops or nerve balsams before bed could whisk you away to dreamland. These remedies often came with extravagant claims promising rejuvenation, mental clarity, and even enhanced moral virtue. You might chuckle imagining a bottle labeled Dr. Slumber's Miracle Elixir, promising a night of blissful sleep after a single drop. Historians still argue about the impact of these commercial remedies on Victorian society. While they undoubtedly helped some people, many were little more than expensive placebos or, worse, dangerous substances that led to addiction or poisoning. The era's lack of regulation meant consumers often had little way to distinguish safe treatments from charlatanism. The rise of these patent medicines coincided with growing public anxiety about health and productivity. Sleeplessness was increasingly seen as a threat not only to individuals, but to the social order. Advertisements targeted middle-class families desperate for solutions exploiting fears and hopes with seductive promises. Interestingly, some legitimate doctors condemned these remedies, warning against their use, while others incorporated them into their practices. This blurred line between professional medicine and commercial hype created a complicated landscape for those seeking relief. Besides ingestible remedies, there were also various topical applications, creams, ointments, and bath additives marketed to relax muscles and nerves. The packaging often featured soothing imagery, serene faces, moonlit skies, and delicate flowers. These visual cues were as much part of the appeal as the ingredients themselves. You might find it reassuring that skepticism about quick fixes isn't a modern invention. Victorian consumers navigated a confusing marketplace, weighing anecdotal evidence testimonials and glossy advertisements. Their quest for rest was as fraught and hopeful as yours. As you imagine yourself choosing a mysterious bottle from the apothecary shelf, you sense the desperation and hope driving these midnight quests. The Victorian night, full of strange potions and promises, mirrors our own ongoing search for peaceful sleep. Next, we'll reflect on the legacy of Victorian sleep practices and their quiet echoes in our modern nights. You're now resting in the quiet aftermath of a long Victorian night, feeling the slow fading of restless thoughts as the legacy of these odd, gentle, and sometimes curious sleep practices settles softly around you. The echoes of feather beds, scented sachets, lullabies, and mysterious potions still whisper through time, shaping how we understand sleep even today. Imagine yourself wrapped in soft blankets, the scent of lavender drifting faintly in the air, and the gentle ticking of a clock marking the peaceful passage of time. A well-known fact is that many Victorian sleep ideas quietly persist into our modern world. Warm baths before bed, chamomile tea, dimmed lights, and bedtime rituals are staples of contemporary sleep hygiene. The Victorians were among the first to emphasize the importance of routine and environment in fostering good rest. You might smile at how some of their wisdom has traveled through centuries, even as our technology and lifestyles have changed dramatically. On the quirkier side, you might be surprised to learn that some Victorian practices have been rediscovered or reinvented by modern enthusiasts. Dream pillows, herbal sachets, and even the concept of white noise echo, the old attempts to tame the night. You could picture a hipster retreat in a cozy cabin surrounded by vintage sleep aids, blending old and new in a quest for tranquility. Historians still debate which Victorian methods genuinely improved sleep, and which were comforting rituals with no scientific basis. The truth likely lies in a delicate mix. Some remedies soothed the body and mind, others offered placebo relief, and all contributed to a cultural understanding of sleep as a precious, sometimes fragile state of being. The Victorian emphasis on the mind-body connection anticipated modern sleep science, but the era also revealed the limits of knowledge and the sometimes desperate measures taken in pursuit of rest. This blend of earnest science folk wisdom and hopeful experimentation creates a rich tapestry that continues to fascinate. You might find comfort in knowing that the Victorian night was in many ways not so different from your own, filled with hopes for peaceful sleep, restless moments, and the search for calm. Their rituals, whether strange or soothing, were attempts to bring order to the darkness. As you drift toward your own sleep, feel the gentle continuity linking you to those long-ago nights where candles flickered and minds sought the quiet sanctuary of rest.